As we all sit back and enjoy the week leading into the 2024 Grand Final between Sydney and Brisbane, feels like the perfect time to go over some football facts relating to the Grand Final. Before we go back in the past, here are a couple quick facts about our two Grand Finalists. First of all, the Swans are the first side in VFL AFL history to make a Grand Final in the same season they lost the game by 100 points or more. It was fitting that they beat that side in Port Adelaide to advance to Saturday's game. With Brisbane joining them, it's the first fully interstate Grand Final since 2006, where West Coast defeated Sydney by 1 point. And the only other time Brisbane and Sydney have played each other in a Grand Final was way back in 1899, if you count Brisbane as Fitzroy. In that game, Fitzroy kicked 3 goals 9 to beat South Melbourne, who kicked 3 goals 8. Hopefully, we can get a Grand Final that is just as close. Jesse Hogan won the Coleman Medal this year with an impressive 69 goals in the home and away season and a further 8 in the final series. However, we all know his Giants went out in straight sets and marked another year without a team having the Coleman medalist in the winning premiership team. You might think the last player to do it was Lance Franklin in 2008 when he reached the 100 goal mark, but it's not. It is another Hawthorn player and his former teammate in Jared Ruffhead. In 2013, he managed to lead the league with 68 goals during the home and away season. He added another 4 goals in finals, including 2 in the 15-point Grand Final win over Fremantle. It's now been over a decade since this double was done, and alongside Ruffhead and Franklin, Matthew Lloyd in 2000 are the only 3 players to do it in the 21st century. By the time the VFL got to 1925, the original 8-team competition had expanded up to 12. In that year, 3 teams were added in Hawthorn, Footscray and North Melbourne. Everyone at AFL headquarters is in a rush for our modern day expansion teams like GWS, Gold Coast and soon to be Tasmania to get ultra competitive and play finals quickly. But have a listen to this. Out of those 3 expansion teams added in 1925, do you know which one of them won a premiership first? Well, surprisingly, it was Footscray, who defeated Melbourne in 1954 by 51 points to be the first premiers out of the expanded teams. It took 30 seasons. Hawthorn were the next to join them, fittingly defeating Footscray by 43 points. Then in 1975, North Melbourne, 50 years after joining the VFL, finally won a premiership, facing a fellow expansion club in Hawthorn, who they defeated by 55 points. If history is anything to go by, GWS, who have made a Grand Final, are doing well, and the Gold Coast are through about a third of the weight Footscray fans had to endure during the 1930s and 40s. AFL crowds have boomed since the end of the COVID lockdowns. Round 1 broke the all-time attendance record, and the league has had 16 rounds in 2024 with over 300,000 people going to games, which has never been done before. The all-time total of 7,475,146 fans at games was also shattered. We know the Grand Final is usually the highest attended game, normally reaching at least 99,000, if not 100,000 live spectators. But the highest ever recorded crowd was in the 1970 Grand Final. 121,696 people went to watch Carlton vs Collingwood. Carlton ended up coming back from 44 points down to overrun Collingwood, winning 111 to 101. It is still the biggest comeback in VFL AFL Grand Final history and was done in front of a record crowd that is unlikely to ever be broken. Grand Finals are about being in the winning team, but for individuals, nothing can beat the Norm Smith medal for being the best player on the ground. But when someone wins it from a losing side, it is the ultimate bittersweet moment. In the entire history of the award, dating back to 1979, just 4 players have won it, being on the wrong side of the final result. The first was Maurice Rioli in 1982, as Richmond, who were up by 11 points at halftime, lost to Carlton. Rioli gathered 19 disposals and kicked an equal game-high 3 goals. 7 years later in 1989, the greatest grand final might have been played. It was also the scene for one of the best individual performances in grand final history. Gary Ablett Sr. kicked 9 goals for Geelong, which is still the most goals kicked on the day. He was unstoppable. In the game itself, Hawthorn held off Geelong's huge comeback in the final quarter, and despite many Hawthorn players being pivotal in the game, the Norm Smith medal had to go to Ablett Sr. and his record-breaking performance. In 2002, Nathan Buckley had 28 kicks in the grand final, along with a goal in Collingwood's narrow 9-point loss to Brisbane. And the last player to achieve the feat was Chris Judd in 2005, as he had 29 disposals in West Coast's close loss to Sydney. For all the AFL teams that have made at least 5 grand finals, 2 of them stand out. In a positive light for Melbourne, they have the best winning percentage in VFL AFL history on grand final day. In total, they have 13 wins, 5 losses, and a draw from their 1948 game against Essendon. Taking away the draw as a neutral result, it's 13 wins from 18 trips and a winning percentage of 72%. They are just in front of Hawthorn, who do have the same amount of wins, but have an extra loss. Now the team for the lowest win percentage might surprise you. It's not Collingwood, who do hold the record for most grand final appearances and losses, which sit at 27. South Melbourne, now Sydney, are only 5 and 13 in grand finals for only a 28% win rate, but the number 1 spot is still well behind these 2 clubs. It's St Kilda, who from their 7 grand final appearances have only got 1 premiership cup to show for it. Their 1-point win over Collingwood in 1966 is their only premiership to date, and the club has the current longest premiership drought in the AFL. They have been brutally unlucky, featuring in the 2010 draw, where they were storming home against Collingwood, and were a Matthew Scarlett toe poke away from a possible win against Geelong in the 2009 grand final. We all know how important depth is in the AFL. Everyone talks about the top 6 players in each side, but very rarely are the bottom 6 mentioned and the 25th, 26th and 27th man in the squad. Injuries happen, and these type of role players can be important. So does excellent depth match up with premiership success? Since 2000, the data says no. It is incredibly rare for AFL clubs to do the double, meaning winning the AFL premiership and the reserve one either in the VFL, Waffle or Sandful. It's only been done 4 times since the 2000 season. In 2007, Geelong's reserves won that season's VFL premiership, and we all know how good that AFL side was. During Hawthorn's three-peat, they only got 1 VFL premiership in 2013, however, the reserve side did make the grand final in 2014 and 2015. In the Western Bulldogs premiership year of 2016, Footscray also won that year's grand final, and the last side to do it was Richmond in 2019. It's a rare achievement in the current AFL competition, and will be even harder to achieve due to the VFL expanding of late and the strength of the standalone clubs.